Hey everybody, welcome to Cast and Court TV. This is your girl, Miss Public Info, here with the latest and greatest and sometimes hated updates of the most high-profile cases going on around the country. Thanks so much for joining me today, guys. Happy Wednesday, happy hump day. Here we are. We apparently survived the rapture. Maybe we didn't make it. I'm kidding. I definitely would have made it. I am a fierce woman of faith. There was no rapture, guys. I don't know where this came from, but it's wild, wild, wild. I think people are just bored at home. They need something to do. I can find a million other things to do than to come up with some doomsday rapture theory that is definitely sort of crackpot originated. Okay, guys, so let's get into this. Yesterday we had a long episode. We're not going to have as long of an episode today. I promise you, we're going to just get through it because there are two things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about Deontay Nash, the stylist that testified during the Diddy trial. And I want to talk about David Geffen, the David Geffen divorce. Now, let's get on it. This is all interesting, all juicy. Let's handle it. Okay, normally, my show is not about the juicy, it's not about any of that. It's really just about the court proceedings, but sometimes court proceedings are a little bit juicy, and today they are. Now, you may notice from this photo that this is Cassie Ventura. It is. Well, that man, very handsome, by the way, man standing next to her in that photo is Deontay Nash. Now, you may remember the former stylist for Sean Combs actually testifying during the Sean Combs 8-week trial, where he talked about how he had to defend Cassie against Sean Combs. He even at one point talked about jumping on Sean Combs's back. He was also one of the many people who actually wrote a letter to Judge Submaranian pleading Judge Submaranian to keep Sean Combs in jail after the prostitution convictions. And they were discussing bail and how Sean Combs may be coming out. Well, Deontay Nash's letter to the judge was one of very big, uh, big contempt against Sean Combs. He talked about how he was afraid for his life. He talked about how he risked everything to testify in this trial and begged the judge not to release Sean Combs. Of course, the judge did not release Sean Combs, but it wasn't solely on Deontay's letter, based on Deontay's letter, but certainly his letter did help. Okay, now, yesterday in Los Angeles Superior Court, Deontay Nash filed a 37-page lawsuit against Sean Combs, accusing him of sexual battery, human trafficking, and false imprisonment. Guys, why is this a bigger deal than maybe the other cases or civil lawsuits that I've talked about? Because under oath, Deontay Nash said he had no plans on filing a civil lawsuit. He said that under oath. Now, my spidey senses go up and I'm saying, well, one of two things has happened here. One, he lied under oath and said that so that his testimony wouldn't be prejudiced against the jury and they wouldn't automatically nullify his testimony as being some sort of, caper to actually help his civil lawsuit that he planned to file later, a la Don Richard, whose testimony was essentially nullified by the jury because she had already filed a lawsuit and they found her to be a prejudiced witness in the case. Now, that's one. The other is what Deontay Harris is claiming, and is that he was too scared to actually file the civil lawsuit. Now, some of you might be like, oh, come on, how can he be afraid to file a civil lawsuit? Well, here's the thing, guys, and I've told you guys this on previous episodes. Filing a civil lawsuit, especially one of this magnitude, where you're talking about dealing with a multimillionaire, a mogul with assets and access and power, automatically puts you in the position of being deposed. What's being deposed? Being having a deposition filed against you. And what do depositions do? Depositions essentially, for straight talking terms, get into your business. They get into your business, into your life, the things that might be relevant to the case. They also dig into your histories, your past, and because this involves sexual battery, they dig into your sexual history. They dig into people that might know you. They dig into other past lawsuits and things of that nature. So there are a myriad of reasons why Deontay Nash might have been afraid to initially file the civil lawsuit. Also, more poignantly, he was afraid to file the civil lawsuit because he was afraid of retaliation from Sean Combs. Sean Combs is tucked away there in the men's Brooklyn Federal holding facility, but he can reach out and touch through people that he can hire to touch Deontay if he wanted to. And I'm assuming when Deontay says he just got the courage now, that is what he means. So let's talk about the lawsuit. Now, according to the lawsuit, Deontay said that he was hired to be Combs' stylist around 2008 at the age of 21 and worked for him until around 2018. That's roughly 10 years while on staff. He said that during that time period, he also worked as a stylist and creative director for then girlfriend of Sean Combs, Cassie Ventura, who also, of course, as we know, Cassie had her own lawsuit against Sean Combs that involved sexual abuse and things of that nature. Now, end quote, this is from the lawsuit. Nash personally experienced sexual, physical, mental, and emotional abuse at the hands of defendants during this 10-year period of employment. He incurred forced tests of loyalty and manipulation, harm, and threats of death, the lawsuit says. The lawsuit alleges that Deontay was sexually assaulted by Combs on multiple occasions. Now, let's talk about what that could actually mean. So, for those of you who aren't familiar, sexual assault could be as casual as you might be thinking in your head, as casual as someone rubbing their hand against your private parts, grabbing your private parts, and as you know, grabbing your chest, be it a woman or a man, rubbing, petting your face, trying to kiss you. It could be any of those things on a casual to mid-level severity range. But then, of course, on a severe level, it could be as severe as someone actually, forcing themselves on you. Okay. Now, Nash said that the alleged abuse prompted him to resign in 2018, but that Combs continued to threaten Mr. Nash even after his employment ended. And this is the reason why Deontay has been so afraid of Sean Combs to file the lawsuit to testify in the case. He talks about one incident that occurred in 2013 and 2014, where Combs had discovered that Deontay and Cassie had gone out to dinner without Combs's permission. And then the following day, Combs threw Nash into a car and violently strangled him. See, this is the violence that we're talking about, that everybody's talking about. Combs in his defense plea yesterday for the sentencing said, well, there are no victims in this case. And any time that he's actually been assaulting anybody that came up during trial, this was fueled by the drugs. There are no victims in this case. I beg to differ there. He talked about another occasion in 2014 where Combs and his security team allegedly went into his home without his permission, and then they confiscated Deontay's keys and his phone while they forcibly searched his house for Cassie. The lawsuit goes on and says, after enduring years of abuse, I, meaning Deontay Nash, finally found the courage during the criminal trial, and I am now ready to take action. Sean Combs has never taken accountability for the years of harm he inflicted on me and so many others. Now, of course, Combs is going to be sentenced on the 3rd. I talked to you yesterday about, some of the letters that he had received on his behalf. One from, Young Miami, the ex-girlfriend, very public ex-girlfriend of his, and of course, one from his mother. And then there are some subsequent letters from his children as well. Now, during the trial, Cassie testified, and so did Deontay. They all testified about the violence that he inflicted on Cassie. Obviously, we saw the video, but Deontay also describes this one time where he actually had to jump on Combs' back to keep him from beating on her. He also testified in the trial that Combs regularly threatened Cassie and that he would beat her. He also testified about a time that Combs allegedly grabbed Cassie's hair, who was asleep, and started hitting her pretty hard, he says. He says that he hit her head hit a bed frame, and she started bleeding, and that Combs told her told her and an assistant and Deontay, all three of them, look what you all made me do. He also testified in trial that he dialed 911 but was told to hang up and said that he feared retaliation, but did tell some of the Combs employees at the time about the abuse and told the court Combs got physical with him a few times. And I think we've seen the details of some of that physical action here in this lawsuit. So Nash is seeking both compensatory and punitive damages and demands a jury trial. Okay. Now, this is just one of the many civil lawsuits that Combs has against him as it relates to this trial and as it relates to the abuse inflicted upon Cassie Ventura and inflicted on others. I think he's up to somewhere upwards in the 80s as it relates to the civil lawsuits. And that does not include, I'm not including the ones that were frivolous in nature and went poof, bye-bye. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the very credible ones. Just as much as he's had a lot of frivolous lawsuits sort of thrown his way because of people who are bottom feeders and looking for money and things of that nature, there are just as many credible lawsuits out there launched against Sean Combs, and this is one of them. Okay, so let's move on. Now, yesterday, I was talking to everyone on live about some of the aftermath of the Cassie P Diddy of it all, and I was talking about sort of like these arrangements, these relationships that start off as a benefactor relationship. You have somebody like Sean Combs, or you have somebody who's a millionaire, and they take on a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a husband, a wife who is essentially a trophy, and the husband or wife really doesn't understand the program. And I talked about how Cassie didn't really understand what the trophy program was. And it's essentially when you are with someone of that sort of clout and latitude, that if you come into it with no access, no power, no nothing, no value, so they think, then they are sort of the ones that sort of get to run the show. And in that, when I was talking about that, I mentioned the David Geffen divorce. And some people were like, well, who is David Geffen? We need to know who David Geffen is. What is this about? Now, David Geffen is somebody who owned Geffen Records. He is a former record executive who became almost a multi-millionaire overnight when he sold Geffen Records to MCA Records for about $550 million back in the 90s. This sort of started his trajectory onto his now billionaire status. He also is an avid art collector, owning all kinds of luxury art items there in his home that has attributed to his massive wealth. He also owns a $600 million super yacht. Okay, guys, he is very mega rich. Now, he has been married to a woman. David Geffen is 82 years old. But back in 2023, David Geffen married a man who, by the name of Donovan Nichols, who's an actor and who started going by the name of David Armstrong. Ironically, David and David, right? And so David Michaels, and I'm sorry, Donovan Michaels, David Armstrong, and David Geffen met on seekingarrangements.com. Now, if you don't know what seekingarrangements.com is, where have you been? I'm kidding. Now, seekingarrangements.com is actually an arrangement, like a sugar daddy, sugar baby site. And it's a site where people go on there to seek arrangements, a benefactor of wealth, if you will, a young, beautiful, hot-bodied, a sexy guy or girl goes to find a very rich man or woman to sort of benefactor them, take care of them. Now, this sort of lifestyle it goes on regularly here in Los Angeles. And I talked about this yesterday and talked about some of the people I know who actually, if you wanted to revisit that live, you could revisit that live. But I talk about some of the people I know that are actually in that benefactor factor situation. I talked about how even I've been, had the chance to do that, but I would never do that because really, I don't want nobody running my show, guys. It's one of those things. Your girl, Miss Public Info, loves to run her own show. So I'm not cut out for that kind of life. But I digress. This particular site is for that. So David Donovan found David Geffen on there, and Donovan later on in the relationship, when he filed this lawsuit stemming from David Geffen filing for divorce, Donovan says that the first night that they met, that David Geffen paid him $10,000 for sex, and that he began to sort of parade him around his friends as some sort of, charity case, if you will. Now let's get the David and Davids. Let's get the Davids up so you can see who I'm speaking about here, and you will see maybe why this is a little bit of a cumbersome issue for the Davids, essentially because David Geffen now is a rich white man. Okay, that's everybody knows that about him. But Donovan Michaels is a not rich and was brought up by adopted black guy. Okay. So Donovan Michaels kind of, alludes to this in the lawsuit where he talks about how David, when he met him in 2020, now some sources, how they met is kind of a words of discrepancy, because some sources are saying that they met because David Armstrong was hired as uh, David Geffen's trainer. Okay. But that has been proven not to be true. Page Six famously reported that Armstrong essentially met Geffen on the seekingarrangements.com dating site. Now, they got married ultimately in a ceremony in Beverly Hills in 2023. But then just 2 years after the marriage, David Geffen filed for divorce. Now, why did he do that? Let's get into that, because this is why we're going to get into some of the juice here. There's a lot of tea here, because David Beckham. I knew I was going to make that mistake. David Geffen is actually worth around $9 billion. Okay. Now, Armstrong is claiming that Geffen, at the time of their marriage, had actually vowed to take care of him for the rest of his life. But Geffen is saying, his folks are saying, there is actually no actual oral, written, and stated agreement that says that I've agreed to take care of him for the rest of his life. And David Geffen is saying this is a shakedown. This is a ludicrous and contrived shakedown for cash. This is meant to publicly humiliate me because he is bitter about the divorce. And this is exactly what the court filing said. This is I'm quoting some of the court filing and what it says about it. And some of the things in the court filing, they talk about that Donovan is claiming that, David Geffen made him get unnecessary surgeries. Now, this is a la Sean Combs, Cassie Ventura, because if you remember the case, she talked about how Sean Combs forced her to get breast implants, and because he didn't like them, the day after the surgery made her get under the knife again to fix whatever it was that he didn't like. And she was, had to, just grin and bear it. And Donovan Michael slash David Armstrong sort of complains about the same thing as it relates to David Geffen. He talks about how David Geffen makes him get painful laser surgeries, made him get painful dental surgeries, how he would become irate over just an ingrown hair on him, that he would just, have to do everything he wanted him to do, how he would actually hire a male and female escorts, how he would, he basically forced an open marriage on Armstrong, and how he knew that Armstrong had come from a trauma-filled adopted background, and that in the presence of other people, it seemed like he was the hero, but behind closed doors, he sort of, humiliated him because of his background. That he talks about how at one point, Armstrong says he goes to David Geffen and says, I don't want to do this lifestyle anymore. I want to be, have an independent lifestyle, like a normal marriage, essentially. And that David Geffen said, fine, and immediately divorced him. Now, this is just wild, 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 wild. Now, he says that when he decided to divorce him after these 26 months of marriage, they divorced. He filed the divorce, I believe, in May of 2025 of this year after 26 months of marriage, cited irreconcilable differences. So after they tied the knot in March of 2023 and tied the knot with no prenup. Now, this is where David Armstrong has possibly hit the sugar baby jackpot because there is no prenup on this thing. Now, California is a supposed community property state. That doesn't mean all property. It varies. But as it relates to income, any monies that David Geffen would have earned 2023 on would be eligible for this, spousal support, etc., or part of the settlement. But the monies that he had prior to coming into the marriage, according to the California community property laws and rules, he wouldn't be entitled. Armstrong wouldn't be entitled to those monies. Okay. Now, David Armstrong, Donovan Michaels is saying that David Geffen left him homeless, that he essentially left him homeless, kicked him out of the estate in New York, that he had nowhere to go. He was essentially homeless, that he depended on Geffen for everything. And so he is basically demanding a an undescribed amount of for the settlement, and he is asking for a property so that he can live without that property being snatched from him in the future, so he won't ever have to become homeless. And again, David Geffen is saying, I never promised to take care of you for the rest of your life. That is not true. But now this current status is that David Geffen has now sort of fallen on his sword and said, listen, I just want to be single. I want to be done with this thing. We're going to pay him and I want to get on with my life. The status of this whole thing now is essentially that you know, he's willing to pay spousal support to some degree. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if the property is, involved in that or not, but that is the latest. And I know people wanted to know about that. So that is the latest. And that is the David Geffen divorce there. Now, guys, this is what I was talking about yesterday. I was talking about people that I know that are in the situation, talking about the Cassie thing. Because of course, I've been a supporter for Cassie, a supporter for all the victims in the Sean Combs case. But I talked yesterday about the accountability of her, not as a victim, but the accountability of her as a woman. And I'm going to talk about the accountability of Donovan Michaels as a man, as a partner in this relationship. You have to know that when you are in a situation like this, that you are depending on a benefactor to essentially take care of you and benefit your lifestyle and take care of you in that way, that you're dancing to their music. You are no longer the main character. That is the program. This is called this is self-described. I call it the trophy program, okay? And in the trophy program, the trophy is not the main character. Trophies are what they're supposed to be. They are pristine golden statues of beings that sit on a ledge or a nice shelf in your home. They often collect dust. They often just sit there and sort of watch everything go by, only to be picked up when the person wants to show the trophy off, talk to someone about it, or, just to admire it during its private time. A trophy also can be used as a punching bag. How often do people come home and throw trophies around the house or artifacts that they have to show off their art collection around the house because they're angry at what happened that day? That's the trophy program, guys. You're just there for that. And if you're willing to be in that sort of lifestyle, there are some people out there that can benefactor your lifestyle. And there's more than one side to it. If you see a situation where a man or a woman is willing to sort of bankroll you, you got to know there's going to be a downside to it. You got to know that you're going to have to dance to their music. And essentially, this is what happened with both the Sean Combs situation and what happened with the Donovan Michael slash David Armstrong situation. Both people said, if you don't want to do what I'm doing, then fine. And Sean Combs actually, he dangled his, and so she continued on with it. But David Geffen didn't, and he waited until this guy said, "Well, I'm done with this. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to live like this. I would like a normal marriage if we can't." And David Geffen said, "Oh, filing for divorce. See ya. Don't need it." Because it's an arrangement. And especially when you meet someone on a website like Seeking Arrangements. Listen, I'm no hater. You do what you got to. You fake it till you make it. Fake it with you shake it. You get it how you live it, okay? But the reality is that there are expectations when you live in such comforts. There are consequences to living in such comforts. The great thing about being poor in comparison to a 9 billionaire person, um, a billionaire, excuse me, is that you never have to worry about someone trying to chastise you about whatever you're doing, or trying to tell you what to do and when to do it, because you are not at anyone else's behest. That's the great thing about hustling for yourself, or working for yourself, or whatever you want to call it. I call working hustling, okay, because that's just, it's interchangeable for me. But that's the great thing about owning your own name, owning your own self, and not being property of someone else, is that there's no one else to sort of tell you what to do, where you need to go, and where you need to be. I was watching one of my favorite old shows. I have to tell you, one of my favorite old shows is Dynasty. And I was watching the updated version. Now, when it was on, I didn't watch it, but because I'm, catching up on things now, I've been catching up on the new Dynasty. And, I've always been in love with mansions and jewelry and all the luxury big hair, which I try my best at doing all of those things on my budget, of course. Which is the reason why I wear all these, big tchotchke jewels, fake, by the way, on my hands and all of that. But, I've always been in love with that sort of thing. But what did Dynasty, for example, Knots Landing, Falcon's Crest, all of them, what do they have in common? Drama. If you're gonna live in the comforts of a big Southern Gothic mansion with servants and employees just gallivanting about the house, uh, serving at your every whim, then you got to know you're going to have drama. There's going to be all kinds of drama. There's no such thing as a perfect story. So I say all of that to say, for two reasons: for the girlies and the boys and the men and the women out there who are looking for a benefactor, or who are looking to be a benefactor, because there's drama with that too. Look at P. Diddy and look at David Geffen. They got drama. But I say that for mostly for those who are seeking a benefactor in these perilous times that we're in. You have to know that there are going to be downsides, and it may take you further than you want to go to actually being involved in an arrangement like this. And I would say that the risks and the negatives far outweigh the positives in this sort of situation. This is a moral call. And this has nothing to do with me. This is your business or whatever. But I would say legally, there are lots of risks involved. Now, can you potentially gain your own wealth from marrying someone very rich and staying in the marriage maybe 2 to 3 years and walking away with some cash? Potentially. But what do you have to risk during that 2 to 3 year period? Your sanity, your honor, your pride, your value, all of those things. So just think about that. All right, guys. That's it for Cast and Court TV for today. We are going to be coming back on the after show. I will be here. We'll be talking about this and get some opinions on this benefactor lifestyle because this is very interesting, honey. Okay, and we will be back then. Thanks so much for hanging with me. If you can't hang with me on a live, make sure you take it out later. Make sure to subscribe and like, please. I'm trying to reach. I'm like one follower away from 900, but I'm really my goal for the next month, September and mid-October, is to get to 1,000. Would really love for you to subscribe and like, please. Make sure you check out my lives. If you would like to support the channel, please do. It aids in us getting a lot of these legal briefs that we need to sort of inform you of the latest and greatest and sometimes hated updates of the most high profile cases going on around the country. Okay, so thanks so much, guys. We'll talk to you soon, and I'll see you in a few. Peace.